Okay, so I think we're starting to have some people come in now. We'll just for those who have dialed in already, thank you for arriving on time. We'll just give it another minute or two in case anyone's running a little bit late this morning. And then around 11:03, we'll kick off with the session. Good morning, everyone that's commenting in the chat as well. Lovely to have you here. Hi, good morning, Alice. Nice of you to join us. Just give it another minute. We're getting up to the numbers now. We're getting there slowly but surely. Oh, we have James all the way from Australia.
Wow.
That's dedication dialing in at whatever time it is over there. When he's saying good evening, I'm assuming it's later on in the day. Apologies for not knowing the time difference, although I probably should. Right, let's get off going then. So my name's Paul Findlay. I'm Director of Charities here at Oaks. And for those that don't know who Oaks are, we are a consultancy based in the Midlands in England who really focus on working with organisations that really have a social purpose. And that's something that's passionate across the Oaks team. And we love and are very fortunate to work with some unbelievable clients across sports for development, education, and charity sector. I'm a relative newbie at Oaks. I've only been in the seat for about 3 months, so apologies if I am slightly rusty. This is the first webinar I've done. I've hosted a number of panels, but none of them online, so apologies for any tech issues that may occur. And for anyone that doesn't understand my accent, I will try and speak a little bit slower because I'm very aware that I've got a broad Scottish accent, so apologies in advance. But you're not here to hear from me. You're here to hear from our amazing panel. And today we've got Lindsey Cape, Sophie Randles-Dunkley and Matt Corr, who each will give a little bit of an introduction to themselves. And then we're going to get into all things supporter experience. And hopefully, if all goes well, by the end of the session this morning or this evening, if you're in Australia, each of you will leave here with a little bit more knowledge or some little gems of ideas that you can go away and impart back into your own organisation. Because the one thing that we all know is supporters really are the heartbeat and the lifeblood of the charities that we all care deeply about, and without which, you know, we would struggle to coexist. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Lindsey first, and then Lindsey, if you wouldn't mind introducing Sophie, and then last but not least, Sophie, if you would introduce Matt. Over to you, Lindsey.
Thank you, Paul. It's nice to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me. And my name is Lindsey Cape, and I'm from the breast cancer charity CoppaFeel. I started in the charity sector 20 years ago, and the first 5 years as a volunteer. And I guess one thing that is interesting is when you start off that way, you really do see the supporter experience from the angle of being a supporter, as our volunteers are. And so I often think of those days and those times with charities that I really felt appreciated and others maybe not so much. I was 5 years as a volunteer, and then the last 15 years I've been in paid roles, and I've worked for large charities like Macmillan Cancer Support and also smaller organizations like Fair Share and CoppaFeel, where I am now. So really looking forward to contributing today, and I'd like to hand over and introduce Sophie.
Hi, I'm Sophie Randles-Dunkley. So like Lindsey, I've been fundraising for over 20 years, broadly in big charities, and my specialism has become around creating great supporter experiences for people engaged in public fundraising. So I've had the pleasure of working on some amazing campaigns, including the World's Biggest Coffee Morning, Longest Day Golf Challenge, Cancer Research UK's Race for Life and Relay for Life, and more recently the Poppy Appeal. And there's this unifying theme that runs through all of that, is that people who support charity want to feel connected to that charity. And that's what this is all about. So these days I work with charities, big and small, to help them create connections with their supporters and make their supporter journeys as awesome as they can possibly be. And hand over to Matt.
Thanks, Sophie, and yeah, hi everyone. Similar to the other panelists that I've been, at larger and smaller organisations. I've been at RNIB for about the last 10 years, where I've worked in and around like individual giving and fundraising for a big chunk of that time, and had a real privilege of being able to be in a mini team within fundraising where we were able to take a step back and look at the whole picture and work really closely with our insight team to understand what's working, what's not working, what can we test, what can we learn, how different products and propositions fit together, and how people might be interacting with multiple areas, and the different teams that are responsible for each area might not realize what the person is getting as a whole. And at the moment, I'm heading up the customer experience team at RNIB. So it's a fairly new team that RNIB created just before lockdown, actually, to look across the entire organization, all the many teams that are responsible for like communicating with people, but are typically like disconnected from each other, to like work really closely with those teams to plan and coordinate what people should be getting, when and why, and what the current as is experience looks like. So I'm sure we'll get into all of those kind of questions shortly. So I'll pass back to Paul.
Thank you so much, everyone. I think for everybody that's on the call, you can agree we've got a fantastic panel. And what I should say is I should have done a little bit of housekeeping at the start. So there is, at the bottom of your Zoom tab, there will be a Q&A. So by all means, don't feel you have to wait till the end. Please ask questions. One of the team at Oaks will be filtering them and passing them through to myself, and then I'll ask the panel at the end of the session when we've got a moment, and hopefully we'll get some interesting questions from the audience as well. So that's the introductions done. I think the next part to move on to is now really getting into the crux of why we're here. For those who are joining a little bit late, you've not missed anything other than some introductions. So welcome, it's great to have you here. And I suppose the first question I'm going to ask is probably the most simple, or he says that, but it may not be. And this is just up to anybody, so by all means, panel, jump in. But ultimately, what I think would be great to know is why you feel that supporter experience is so pivotal to fundraising success, and what are the key ways in which a positive supporter experience can impact an organisation's fundraising strategy or fundraising plan?
Do you want to give that to one of us specifically, or should we just dive in?
No, any one of you that wants to come in just now.
Okay, so I'm going to transactionally. It's really straightforward, right? So in 2017, off the back of all of that work the government did around the fact that charities were not giving people a great experience, there was a big report called the Etheridge Report, which those of you who are around then will remember. And they set up a commission on donor experience, and they had one big finding, which is that anybody who gets a great experience when they're supporting a charity will, over their lifetime, give significantly more than somebody who doesn't. And it's that straightforward. So we talk a lot about trying to measure lifetime value and things, and it's that stuff can be really difficult, but actually it's right there. People who have great experience give more overall. So you've got thousands of touch points with your supporters. If you can get all of those right, then you'll raise more money, and it's that straightforward.
Absolutely. Matt, Lindsey, do you want to add anything?
No, I think exactly the same for me. Sorry, Matt, if I beat you to it.
No, you go.
In that, having your supporters come back for a second, third, fourth interaction with your organization has to be a really key part of your fundraising strategy going forward. Because we all know it's so much easier to get a donation from someone that already knows you and likes you and has supported you than going and finding someone new. It's expensive for acquisition for new donors. So very much, very much the same answer.
Yeah, I definitely echo those points as well. And that, like, I assume it's one of those that it's probably accepted by everyone who's joined this session, that it's like a very important, like, it's not controversial, that the support experience is so key to like how much money you're able to raise. Particularly thinking about, Lindsey, your point around like acquisition. Like, I know years ago, lots of charities, ourselves included, used to spend a lot of money on bringing new people through the door, and giving a kind of mediocre experience. The attrition was pretty bad, and then what you'd find is the kind of leaky bucket where the charity would focus on pouring more water into this bucket rather than quite simple fixes that could be put in place to really like turn negative experiences into positive ones and keep people around for a lot longer. So yeah, I assume that most people here would recognize is that donating to a charity is largely like, an emotional thing, and that you're always providing some kind of experience, whether you mean to or not, or whether it's planned or not. So yeah, and just as much as to Sophie's point, that like positive experiences can be so pivotal to like long-term giving. Also, like a negative experience, especially at the beginning of a relationship, can completely kill like lifetime value. So yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly that. And it's no different from the commercial world. It's much cheaper to retain customers than it is to recruit new ones. And, people buy from organisations that they trust and feel valued by. And this is a, slightly different customer base in terms of what the ask is, but the principles are the same. If you treat people right, they will come back. And you've articulated that all very well. So I suppose moving on, starting to look at some examples now in terms of, the role in which supporters really play in organisations and how they can be mapped out, in terms of their supporter journey, which I think is really important. It's not just a one-time hit when you have an engagement. There's got to be that journey, and looking at crucial touch points. How, and again, this is open to the panel, how have you managed those supporter journeys in the past, and have you got any kind of key tips or takeaways for the people who have dialed in this morning?
I'm happy to jump in first on that one. So our kind of thinking's evolved quite a bit over the years with this, but generally what we do, a lot of this will sound very obvious, but we start with like an as-is journey map. So we sort of plot out what is the current experience that people are getting, and how does that differ for different segments, for different people? Like, if I do X, what will I get then? And if I opt into email, what will I get? If I don't, what will I get instead? Map out what the current experience is like. And we've actually done some really interesting, useful work with an agency called Media Watch. They mystery shop us. They do other things, but one of the things that we've learned from that is like the differences between what we think people are getting and what they're actually getting. So what they're able to do is to sign up with a unique seed for every single proposition that we want to have monitored, and then we see, okay, well, what are people really getting? And what you tend to find is you'll have like the planned journey that you think people are getting, but then all this other stuff on top that you don't realize, that especially in large organizations where you've got multiple teams that are responsible for emails and campaigns and that sort of thing. So first of all, understand what is currently happening. And then often like the key sort of pain points are like screaming out at you in terms of like, okay, person got a welcome pack or some sort of thank you postcard or something like that. And then there's this huge gap, or, oh, people just getting random newsletters that we didn't expect them to be getting. The other thing I'd stress is that, like, I'd give a concrete example, like regular giving. So you bring in thousands, in our case, thousands of new people every year on a direct debit. Those, the attrition, the first 90 days is like the key period at which most of the attrition takes place. So that's like a key period of time to test and to learn and to really like focus most of your effort and thinking and planning around like giving a really effective welcome experience. And we know that once people get beyond that 12-month threshold, they're very likely to like give for a really long time. So and then the other thing I'd add on that is like, and there's more to be said on this, so I can like come back to this in like future questions, but really understanding who is who on your database and having like a meaningful basis to segment people, so that particularly around things like what's their connection to your cause, like why are they supporting you, not just age, gender, and where they live in the country, but something that really speaks to what their relationship is to the work that you do and what kind of content they're likely to find interesting, so that that can guide the follow-up people that that people get afterwards. I'll pause there and pass it on to anyone else to jump in.
I want to build on that as well, Matt. I think when I'm working with clients, client charities, what's comes out a lot is that people don't actually know what their supporters are getting. So in the area I work most is public fundraising, so events and community and that sort of thing. A lot of people, they never test their own journeys, and in particular in that area, sometimes you're doing a journey, but then also Just Giving are doing a journey, and maybe a third-party event are also doing a journey, and actually you're all sending stuff, and so just participating in that one event, they're getting stuff from 3 different places. So it's really simple to just do a dummy registration and just have a little look and see what people are going to get. It's actually worth investing 30 quid in buying a place in an event and never intending to take part, just so you can see what people are getting, and then you can weave that back in and you can refer back to it, and you can steal the best bits. So the other thing I would say is, when you're looking at mapping out your journeys, it's really important to involve everybody. So in a lot of organisations, it's not just the fundraising teams, but it's also, or the frontline fundraisers, the supporter care team or the digital team could actually be playing a really important part in that journey as well. So chat to them, get to know them, make them your friend, and bring them into that process as well, because you'll uncover all kinds of interesting interactions in those conversations that people didn't know, because charities naturally were super siloed. And so get everyone together and have a chat and talk it all through. I'm a big fan of taping up a big load of brown paper on a wall and using post-it notes and coloured pens and doing it that way. And there's plenty of software now. Microsoft Teams has a whiteboard function, and we can use Miro, which has a free version, to do that sort of stuff virtually. So make it creative and fun, and you'll pull out way more than you will do just sitting trying to do it yourself with a pencil and paper.
Yeah, I won't repeat anything they've said. I will say that since COVID, it's been a challenge, because we are more siloed, and even in organization with CoppaFeel that's smaller, we're finding, because we're not talking over the desk, so we are duplicating those donor journeys where someone signs up to do one thing in one area and then they sign up somewhere else. So yeah, I think sort of, preventing that silo working and working with other teams is really key for us.
Great. No, I think some of the points there will be really useful. And what I will say is we're kind of nearly 20 minutes in and we've not had a "you're on mute" yet, which for me is probably the longest I've been on a call when somebody's not forgotten. I'm just making sure it's not going to be me for the first time. So Sophie, just if I can direct this one just at yourself, and there will be people that are on the call who have got a real aspiration to create a fantastic supporter journey, but their organisation, that just may not be something that they've managed to get round to do, or they may not have the resources or the team. So, how does someone take an idea, a philosophical concept, and really turn that into something tangible? What would be your advice for them just starting off from the ground and then moving forward?
So this happens a lot, right? What you find is that a consultant is brought in to build a lovely strategy, and they say, we need to be more audience-led. We need to be more customer-focused. We need to be supporter first. And it's handed over, and you're like, okay, well, what does this mean? What is this? So actually, yeah, I spend a lot of time working with organizations to translate that into action. And it doesn't need to be difficult or expensive. Really great support experience comes from data and insight, but the vast majority of organizations don't have a data and insight team. They may not even have a data person in the organization. So super simple, right? First thing is we draw a picture of our supporter, and that can be with pen and paper, or it can be just thinking about it. When I was at Macmillan, working on World's Biggest Coffee Morning, we had Marjorie, Sally and Barbara, three women who were all different life stages and slightly different sort of backgrounds and perspectives, and they became our watchword. What would Marjorie do? Would Sally like this? Would Barbara really wear that t-shirt? And so then you can really start sort of picturing it. And I've worked with some organizations where they've gone into online and they've found a photo of Marjorie and they've got it printed out on their desk, and every decision they make, is that what Marjorie would like? Because actually, you know, most of us fundraisers don't look like our supporters. So you really, in order to put yourself in their shoes, bring that supporter to life and talk to your teams about that supporter and start bringing that person into the room. And in a meeting, you know, would Marjorie enjoy what we're about to do here? So that's a really simple, straightforward thing that can just be transformational. The other thing is getting to know your own journey. So this is the other thing that we touched on before, but have a little look. When was the last time you looked at your thank you letter? When was the last time you had a go at doing registration on your website? Do all the links work? Is it all, you know, how does that feel? So there's some very, very simple stuff of just doing a little bit of an internal audit on, is the stuff we're doing right now, is there anything we could do that's super quick win just to make it a little bit better? So after you've done those quick wins, then you can get onto the more meaty stuff and working with stakeholders and other teams to fix the bigger issues and address the big stuff and to implement projects and maybe make a business case. And that then comes down to working with those teams and bringing them on that journey with you. So I've touched on that earlier as well. Make friends with all of those other teams. Who are the enablers? Supporter care, data, marketing, fundraising and marketing need to be friends. It's really important. So make those connections and talk to those people and get them to help you in the most practical terms. So when you're drawing your picture of your supporter, get the marketing guys to help you. Then the other big thing I would say as well is the biggest challenge that a lot of the organisations I work with face is being really inward looking. So we do stuff because it's easier for us, not because it's better for the supporter. So lots of the processes we have internally are what's easier. Oh, supporter care don't really deal with that. They're going to hand that off to the guy in events because it's the events team's job to do that. Well, actually, if we enable supporter care to have that, we upskill them, we give them the information they need and an FAQ document, they can resolve that query in one conversation. And that's better for the supporter rather than waiting to be handed off. So there's really super, super easy stuff. Draw a picture of a supporter, go and have a look at what you're doing right now and fix the easy stuff, and then work with your stakeholders to make sure that you're doing what you need to be doing on a larger scale.
I think there's some absolute little gems in there that people can take away, and especially for some smaller organisations that don't have the resource that you've mentioned, there's still quick wins that anybody can do. And and it was something that Matt mentioned just around that, around the kind of mystery shopper. That's something that I've never considered, if I'm honest. We've never had an external person come in and actually look at what that journey is like. And I'd be interested just in the chat box if any other organisations have done it and how they found that. Would they consider it off the back of hearing how that was beneficial?
The other thing you can do, sorry, Matt, I was just going to say, the other thing what you can do as well, part of your stakeholder engagement to get other people in the organisation interested, ask them to mystery shop you. So get somebody from marketing, would you mind doing registering for one of our events and seeing what happens and telling us what happens? So yes, it can be a really useful engagement tool, and again, doesn't cost anything.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We've definitely found it really revealing in terms of like it sometimes surfaces issues with data that you would have been invisible otherwise. So being able to see like a certain segment, they're meant to get X. Okay, they got X, but they also got A, B, C, D. Or why? We thought we had rules in place that would stop them from getting that. Okay, now we're going to have a conversation with the head of data to look at why that fell down, and it's likely that's affecting thousands of other people that might just be getting random stuff that you didn't intend. So yeah, definitely worth doing, just at least to have the kind of peace of mind that what you think is going out is actually what is going out, and you can fix so many problems that you wouldn't known were there otherwise.
Absolutely. And we've just had James, who's just messaged in the comment around new starters joining an organisation. that's something I always look at and always have looked at when I've joined somewhere is, you know, you just look at stuff and you see something from a different angle or through a different lens. And especially when it's something that you've created yourself, you can be so close to it that you can't see the wood for the trees. So I think it's absolutely vital that whether it's internal teams or external, external kind of support engagement through mystery shopping, there's absolutely value in doing exactly that. So we've just had Megan's just said, well, fundraisers aren't the target audience, or volunteers often are. I often ask fundraisers around the building, would you like to receive a letter for thank yous? Yeah, and you know, this isn't exclusive to people who are giving money, and I know that that's the focus of the chat today. But you know, a previous role of mine, I was head of volunteering for the Football Association, so I was responsible for about 1.7 million volunteers, and when I was doing the survey or the consultation period, which took me about 12 months, understanding the drivers and motivations as to why people want to give up their time is very, very similar as to why they would give up their money. So I think, you know, treating volunteers in such a positive way, the same way as you would do somebody who's handing over some of their hard-earned money is really invaluable, because volunteers are, again, part of the heartbeat of any organisation. Right, moving on to you then, Matthew. Oh, sorry, your mum's not here. I can just call you Matt. Apologies. So you mentioned earlier just around some of the ways in which you've really looked at the data to carry, you know, you sit and say, right, if we've got somebody kind of hooked in and invested for 12 months, they will potentially, or, you know, a high rate of probability, go on and be a long-term supporter. Can you just go into some more of the methodologies and the best practice and how you would look at retaining individual giving and supporters in that way? You know, not necessarily just from you know, an organisation as big as the RNIB, but you know, some ways that smaller organisations can basically kind of keep people engaged for longer periods of time.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, big or small organisations, a lot of it comes down to principles that are pretty simple and can be applied across a lot of different organisations. So a key thing is, like for us at least, is knowing who your supporters are in some sort of meaningful way, rather than them just looking all identical on your CRM, and then having, you know, that insight doesn't just sit in a drawer or get rolled out for like a couple of presentations. That is used to guide what people get and how you segment. So just as an example, like for years, we had a problem with attrition for a long time, with retention. So we'd spend lots of money on getting thousands of people through the door, and probably about half of them or more would have cancelled by 12 months. And we'd had various agencies come in and do, oh, like, we're going to do this new journey with lots of bells and whistles, and here's what they're going to get at Christmas, and here's the welcome pack. And none of that really had a big impact, because essentially everyone was getting the same thing, or you would vary it based on things that speak to who they are and why they support you. So one of the things that's changed since then, I mean, we've got to give a lot of credit to an agency called Donor Voice that we've been working really closely with, that have got a lot of behavioral science insight to back this stuff up. But what we essentially do is, rather than everyone just, you know, before, what really hamstrung us was the data that we would capture at the very beginning as people walk through the door. So beforehand, all we'd get is name, age, name, date of birth, where you live, bank details, etc. Just what's minimally necessary to set up the direct debit. So the only way you could vary things is age, where you live, gender. None of all of that says nothing about who they are and why they're supporting you. So what we introduced was just a couple of key questions at the very beginning. Which of the following best applies to you? You know, I have personal experience of sight loss. Someone close to me has experience of sight loss. I work in a profession related to sight loss. None of the above. And then a second question around that kind of gauges relationship strength. So to what extent do you agree with, you know, this statement, and then, or these few statements? Then from the very beginning, we can say, okay, you guys are our high commitment group. You guys are our low commitment, maybe at risk of cancelling group. These are the people that have told us that they have personal experience of sight loss. You know, maybe a family member's lost their sight. So immediately we can have really meaningful journeys that speak to that, and we're going to speak to them differently. And the other thing we did is, you know, you have a satisfaction survey, like how was the sign up experience? We learned so much about issues that again would have been invisible from the comments and from the feedback we get on the sign up experience, but then that can also go into the journey. So when someone gets a welcome call now, rather than everyone getting the same kind of wooden script about why we're so grateful that you've supported us, we can have different versions of that script. So someone who's told us that they have a family member with sight loss, for example, or has given us feedback on, like, let's say, for example, let's say like Paul was a supporter and had a fantastic experience and feels really strongly about sight loss, whereas Sophie has no particular connection and also had a lousy experience. In the old days, you guys would look identical and get the same thing. But now on the welcome call, we can apologize to Sophie for, you know, the bad experience, find out what actually caused it and fix it. And perhaps Paul would be in a segment where, you know, you're much more likely to want to engage with other stuff. And then that comes to another point around, I think there was a comment around things like, you know, non-financial support. So like volunteering, campaigning, that sort of thing. That's definitely something that we've started to introduce a lot more into the journeys, because in the past, again, you have all these silos where the fundraising team just send out fundraising stuff, and you know, you might have campaigning team that want to encourage people to sign petitions and write to their MP. You know, there's every reason to think that someone who supports you financially is going to be likely to be interested in getting behind a campaign or volunteering, and so being able to sprinkle that stuff into your journey and test it. And particularly knowing those different segments. If someone's really at risk of cancelling, low commitment, you might not do that with them, because you might think, okay, well, we want to maybe introduce some saving activity for them. So lots of that sort of stuff that is really kind of, it begins with deciding what information do I need that's going to tell me who these people are. Let's assign value to getting that information and using it, and then let's start like, where's the most appropriate or viable place where we can capture that stuff, put it on their record, and then have that inform like what people get. I guess I won't go into stuff that we've done on propensity models, because I think I've already spoken a bit too much, but just that there's a lot of testing and learning as well. So, you know, we've got a really great insight team that we work closely with. We're able to, you know, introduce ideas that would get like tested segment by segment, and then see what works and what doesn't work, and then roll out the stuff that works and dump the stuff that doesn't. And then, you know, you can constantly have a model of continuous improvement with that.
No, Matt, that's fantastic. There's a question that's come in that I was going to wait to the end, but I think it's relevant to what you're just saying there. And it's from somebody who's remained anonymous, but they've said, how would you recommend tailoring supporter journeys for different audiences? And I know you've touched on that slightly there, but they went on to say, we find students stroke young people in particular are quite different audiences to reach and engage, and they are typically a newer breed of volunteer versus, you know, so what's the expectancy, and how are you finding that kind of dealing with generational differences?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, because often, and again, this goes back to the previous point, where in the past, because age was one of, like, it was always seen as that's the big factor that determines whether someone's going to stick around or not. So, oh, we need to recruit older donors because they're likely to stick around for longer. And in any age cohort, there's going to be a whole range of people that support you or don't for different reasons. So even amongst your group of, let's say, students that might be harder to reach, doing that deeper dive into understanding who's who gives you, I think, a much better handle on how to segment and what to send to who. I mean, obviously, yeah, like age is going to come into it, and, you know, people, you know, where people are at in their lives, their kind of disposable income they're likely to have. You know, I don't know, like it may be the case that people who are students are more likely to be able to donate their time rather than their money. But, you know, that's going to vary a lot even within your group of students. So understanding a bit more, and just by asking them and like capturing and measuring that information, like, you know, probably gives you alongside age, not instead of age cohorts, but gives you probably like a much stronger basis to be able to, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I agree. My experience has always been asking the why. You know, why is someone doing it? And if you can understand the motivations behind that, that then informs the basis for doing that bit of a deeper dive in terms of then, you know, then what how can you keep them engaged, and what are they looking for as they transition through those life stages, as you mentioned. That's fantastic, Matt. Lindsey?
As a charity that focuses a lot on younger people, we do a lot of thanking on social media with our younger audiences. TikTok, where everybody is. But we
Yeah.
are always trying to think of how we can thank people, and we follow them back on social media if they follow us. And we, we ask them at the start. A couple of things I've written is, and it's because we're a smaller organization, maybe it's different from Matt and Sophie. It feels like it's easier, but we really do ask people how they want to hear from us and how often they want to hear from us. And we always review our thanking strategy every year in our supporter journeys, but maybe even more frequently than that, because things have changed a lot with COVID. So
yeah, I had a conversation with an events team yesterday, and we were talking about, I'm Generation X, the back end, giving away my age. So I like to chat on the phone. I love a chat on the phone. And if a charity calls me to say thank you for a thing, I'm like, oh, that's lovely. But then millennials would rather die than chat on the phone.
yeah.
And Generation Z, if it's not short form text messaging, forget it. So there's, and that those are mega generalizations, right? Because it's a generational thing of people born over 20 years. But the point is, a lot of supporter journeys have stayed pretty much the same, and we rely so heavily on email, and it's just so there's some really exciting, cool work going on. There's a agency called Social Mind who are doing a load of really cool stuff on supporter journeys on WhatsApp and Instant Messenger, and there's some amazing uplift statistics there around just meeting people where they are. And I love what Lindsey said about going to see people. If somebody's interacting with them on TikTok, then interact with them on TikTok. That's the way they want to be. They don't want an email, and goodness gracious, they do not want a phone call. So yeah, there's a lot to be said there for meeting people where they are.
Yeah, love that.
Oh, you're
on mute.
Oh, you were doing
The
so
first
well.
time I was doing so well. If I was a millennial, I would not have done that. Yeah, I think I was just saying that Carolyn had just put in the chat there around do people engage via WhatsApp. I'm personally seeing more organisations doing it.
Yeah.
That's how the FA started engaging with volunteer coaches, especially younger ones and referees, was through WhatsApp, because emails just were not getting open. So, you've got to use the tools that are at your disposal. And yeah, I mean, don't ask me to go on TikTok, Lindsey, but absolutely, if that's where your supporters are living and breathing and engaging, that's where you have to go, and you have to learn and navigate that space as well as possible. So yeah, that's some really useful. Hopefully that answers your question, Carolyn. Lindsey, I'm going to pose a question to you now that's going to require you to dig into your drawers and dig out a crystal ball. Nobody knows what's around the corner, but you've got a breadth of experience that will hopefully give us an informed decision around the landscape and how it's evolving. TikTok didn't exist a few years ago, and now it does. Back when I first started volunteering, it was the wristbands. So I always remember doing something for Help for Heroes, and you got a red, blue, and dark blue wristband, and that's what you got. And I noticed that you're wearing a lovely pink lapel on your top. But as the world's changing and the asks and the demands and the expectations of people are changing, how do you feel it's going to play out over the next couple of years, and how can organisations start to try and be a bit proactive rather than reactive?
I think sessions like this are really useful. I think it's about trying to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening, what other organizations are doing. We don't know what things will look like. At CoppaFeel, we send out a lot of text messages. A lot of those are reminders about checking, because we're in a breast cancer awareness charity and we're reminding people to check their chest. But, people probably aren't going to be wanting receiving any more text messages, SMS messages about that. So we do communicate with supporters on WhatsApp, and we set up groups, for example, for a London Marathon team or a trekking team when there's a lot of people. And so we do that. We are big in social media, and we are always looking at the next social media platform that's come out. Things like Be Real, which seemed like it was going to be a big thing about 8 months ago when it came out. So, we get on there, we start using it, we see if our donors threads we went on, the sort of first day that started. So it's hard to know exactly. And, you know, my esteemed panelists might know more than me, as their experience is more kind of in that individual giving space. But we just try to really keep our ear to the ground, be ready to pivot and be agile. Every 2 years at CoppaFeel, we have a thanking day called our Gratitude Day, obviously. And this year we had it about 2 months ago, and we sent out a card with a Spotify QR code, which went to a dedicated playlist, which were thank you songs, but motivational songs that we know our supporters like, and we see them on TikTok playing these songs. So, you know, things like that, where we're just trying to, you know, set out that whole day where we can thank everyone, and we can think of different ways of thanking them through music, or you know, through cards through the post, or, you know, that sort of thing. So yeah, so I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't know, but I hope that's a little bit helpful.
No, I think that's fantastic. You know, like I said, nobody knows, nobody's seen COVID coming, and that turned the world upside down, and it turned all of us that work in this space upside down in terms of the way that we operate, and how we knew, or what we knew just didn't no longer become relevant. So no, that's really useful. Somebody's just dropped a comment in about Be Real, and just asking. I've tried to introduce it, but it seems a hard sell to get the charity into. How do you use it, Lindsey, if that's okay to ask?
Well, Be Real is like one post a day. So we use it in exactly the same way that we might use Instagram or TikTok, and that we're creating content, and we have some content creators, and social media is really big for us to reach our audience. So we have a pretty big team who work on that. And so, yeah, it's about, I'd be happy to pick up with you separately if that'd be helpful. And it's about just seeing the supporters that you know that are on it, following them, and then doing that one post a day that feels like it's relatable and meaningful, and hopefully they'll follow you back and they'll engage with it. It's really hard, because when we sit around a table and we're deciding things, most everyone in our sort of our trustees and our SMT and some of the senior leadership, we're not the audience. So we recognize that we actually have to put, if, you know, we want to be speaking to young people properly and thanking them, we want to put them at the heart of the decisions. So I don't use Be Real myself, you know, so I'm not the best one. So it is about maybe getting in touch with those people who are the best ones to answer some of that.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that comes back to Sophie's point earlier, where she mentioned very rarely are the people who are doing the job the accurately representative of the audience that we're trying to speak to. No, that's fantastic, Lindsey, and hopefully that answered the question on there. Right, I'm going to talk a little bit now about impact measurement, and this is just open floor to either of the panels, in terms of, you know, it's one thing doing something, it's another thing knowing if it's hit the nail on the head and if it's been successful. How would you say that, or how would you recommend organisations can evaluate the impact of the work that they're doing in this space with their support engagement? You know, there's clear metrics in terms of drop off and whatnot, but in terms of actually looking at if it's a good enough journey, if it's a real engaging way that we can keep speaking to supporters going forward.
So this is a personal bugbear of mine, that what you'll get in a lot of charities is the sort of the finance director turning around and saying, well, why should I invest in this? What's the business case? What are we going to see in terms of uplift? And measuring that stuff is really hard. Loads of it's intangible. What you're measuring is connection and feeling. And yes, that will be borne out in income, and it will be borne out in lowered attrition rates and all that stuff, but it's really, really hard and expensive to measure. So really what you've got to do, there's an element of trust here that if you get this stuff right, it will be effective. And so it's about all those little tiny improvements you can make across the piece, adding up to a whole. But I think the most valuable thing you can possibly measure is what your supporters are telling you. And there's the statistic that I don't know how true it is now, but when I used to work at a radio station charity, the radio station Classic FM, they they done some measurement that if somebody complains, there's another 25 people who have the same complaint and haven't told you. So, and I'd say that's probably quite a good benchmark. So if somebody tells you that they're annoyed with the content of a mailing, or they didn't like that case study, or you're communicating too often, you can absolutely bet there's a boatload of other people who feel the same about that. So you need to take that stuff seriously. And feedback is gold. So surveying, ask people questions. Smaller charities have a steal on this because you have really great relationships with individual supporters, and you can just ring someone up. And I was having a great chat with a fantastic charity recently, and they're saying, just ring them up and have a chat, ask a question. Great, that's where the measurement happens. I don't think I've ever quite cracked how you turn that into a compelling case for a finance director, however, and I'd love to hear if Lindsey or Matt have managed to do that.
Yeah, funnily enough, I mean, like, I remember the first question at the beginning of the session was around like, why is it important? And it was one of the things I almost went into was how not that many years ago, even though there was so much lip service paid to like, oh yeah, we need to get the support experience right and it's really important, it was so hard to actually get investment and sign off for like, okay, we want to do X, Y, and Z as like back, they used to call them stewardship initiatives, because there wasn't a clear ROI against it. Okay, well, it's going to go to these 50,000 people, it's going to cost this much, what's the business case? And yeah, there was a huge gap between what was kind of professed in meetings around being customer centric or supporter centric and what the actual practice was. There wasn't like a magic that I can remember, at least, sort of thing that turned things around, other than like plugging away, continuing to sort of bang the drum and try and influence stakeholders around this. And then once you do it, and then seeing the results, being able to present that back. And I guess that comes back to what this question is about. And yeah, definitely like echo everything Sophie said around it, some of this stuff being really intangible, but you can pick out tangible nuggets. Like, Sophie, like you were saying around feedback, complaints, also positive feedback as well as negative feedback, and how that can, even beyond the sort of measurement use value in that, be used. So again, like, I'll give an example. We've been collecting feedback on the sign-up experience. We go through all the verbatims and all the comments, overwhelmingly positive. But then if you start to see patterns when you get like negative comments that are around the same thing, similar themes that crop up, all right, let's fix those problems. But also, if someone has said, even amongst the positive comments, you'll get like, the sign-up experience was great, wonderful. The person who signed me up was really, charismatic and insightful. Someone might say, oh yeah, and also this course means a lot to me because my dad has glaucoma. All right, great. The welcome caller, so that conversation can be, by the way, thanks so much for your feedback, and like, really sorry to hear about like your dad. And also, furthermore, like, we've got these services that might be useful. So, we've got a helpline, we've got this and that service, so we can signpost people towards things that they're likely to find useful. On the sort of measuring like the impact you're having, sometimes when you've got like a whole journey, like you were saying, Sophie, with like multiple touch points, maybe dozens of touch points, you might be able to see, okay, well, this has had positive impact on attrition or lifetime value, but you don't know what piece of it is necessarily contributing to that. There you've got to really test, and so you'll come with a kind of hypothesis of what some of the major things that you want to introduce into the journey are. Just make sure you have a control group, a fairly like a randomly selected control group with enough people in it, so that they're not getting, let's say for example, people spoke about WhatsApp. Okay, if you want to start experimenting with using WhatsApp to engage supporters, let's have a control group that are not getting that, and let's see what the difference is. And there you can only really test things like not many things at a time, like maybe one or two things at a time. Otherwise it just becomes like a massive tangled mess where you're not able to attribute what has been the cause of a positive or negative kind of change that you've seen. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there and pass it on.
That's great. That's great, Matt. Thank you. I mean, Lindsey, Sophie, do you want to add anything on? Or I think Matt was quite very comprehensive there. And look, this is the age-old bugbear, is trying to measure success in any way, and it's not just binary, which in fundraising it quite often, especially when you've got a finance director who's breathing down your neck, that's the bottom line. That being said, creating a legacy that can't be measured for a few years perhaps is really important as well.
Mm.
Right, we're coming to the business end, and I do have some questions, and I'm seeing them coming in, and hopefully we'll have time to go through them at the end of the panel. I've got a couple more here. The next one is just one example from each of you, if you wouldn't mind. We're talking about all these fantastic initiatives and ideas and examples, but we know it doesn't always work, and not everything is perfect, and there's a lot of trial and error. Can you give me an example, each of you, of something that you've tried that just didn't work, that just completely bombed, and what was your takeaway from that? And I'll leave that up to you to decide who goes first.
Oh gosh, I can't think of anything that's bombed, but what I will say is that I work for a young organization. CoppaFeel has been around for 15 years, which is pretty young, and it's small. And there's a lot of people in the organization who've been there from the beginning. So there's a lot of we've always done it this way. And what I would say is, when you can try to bring people on the journey and help them to see that some of the things that they've always done are nice, but it is about changing and looking at other ways. And if they don't work, you can go back to the way you were doing it. So I would say that that's a challenge with the organization that I'm in, that there's a lot of wanting to stick with those things.
Perfect. Thank you.
I would say in all of this, when you're developing new initiatives and products, you need to put this audience at the centre and not be beguiled by what someone on the board wants, or somebody, or one of your supporters wants. Yeah, when I was at Global Radio, a couple of presenters really into cycling. They wanted to do a London to Paris bike ride. Yeah, that's great. Funny enough, the average Classic FM supporter is not capable of riding 90 miles a day. Who knew? So it's that. And we went on, and it was one of those things where we got 9 people. That wasn't quite enough, and it was that awful kind of balance of enough people to get really miffed that we're cancelling something, but not enough to go ahead. So there's something there about just who are you designing this thing for, and don't be swayed by the highest paid person in the room.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Sometimes it can be really hard to, if something bombs, know why it bombed necessarily. So there's various things that we've tried to introduce where it's not always clear whether it didn't work out because there wasn't that much interest in it, or whether it's because the way that the initiative was resourced was last minute, and everyone's sort of scrambling around trying to pull together the bare minimum, whereas if they had more time, resource, and I guess organizational support to really put everything behind it, it might have turned out differently. That can happen sometimes. I mean, one thing that we tried that failed a few years ago, there was a initiative to kind of bring in new supporters with petitions. So you'll get someone you'll have a petition around something that relates to your work, and get people to start by signing a petition, and then try and speak to them later and see if they want to support your cause financially. We thought that there was good reason to think that might be effective. It wasn't. I guess it's important to not write that type of thing off altogether, just on the basis of, we tried it once and it didn't work. Could be you try it in a slightly different way, with a different time, different group of people, it might work. But there's plenty of. The other thing I'd just add is that often the missed opportunities are in not doing stuff that you could do, rather than, we tried something and it didn't work. There's plenty more examples of that kind of thing, where there was an idea to do something and it just didn't get off the ground where the opportunity was there.
Yeah. No, I think that last one, I think we can all resonate with a time when that's happened, where somebody's had a great idea, and for whatever reason it's just not, and you never know, and it's better to try and fail than fail to try. Right, we've got a few minutes left. There's a bit of a theme coming through in the questions around corporate supporters. So and that's a whole different webinar. That being said, what I would like to just get your steer on is just around you know, I've been on the other side where I've worked with charities where we've looked at how we get our employees to support a charity of the year, or an organisation that we want to support locally or nationally. How do you treat them any different in terms of that supporter journey if you've got an organisation that's looking at getting their 500, 1,000, 5,000 colleagues on board for doing some form of support engagement?
You've got two audiences there when you're working with corporate. You've got the key decision maker, who's the person. So it's making sure that you're designing stuff around them and what it is, how they like to work, and what they need. But you're also, the other audience you've got is their brand. And so you treat their brand like you would Marjorie, Sally and Barbara. And it's, is what I'm doing here going to fit for the way they work, what they do, the way they exist in the world, their positioning, all the rest of it. I'm not a corporate fundraiser, but that it's recognizing that it's just another audience, and you just need to be cognizant of what it is they need, and speaking to them and asking them, and all those things that we were talking about before, understanding how they want you to interact with them, what do they want, listen and provide what they want. And the great thing is you know that's much simpler than it is doing that for 10,000 people. So you should be able to sort of flex your offering to meet their needs.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I guess I would just add that for us goes with the kind of mid-value, high-value program and your thanking strategy fitting into those, because people from companies will be different, as Sophie said. So you want it to fit in with how you're thanking them. That goes with that.
Yeah, and as I say, the whole corporate fundraising landscape's a completely different beast to what we've been discussing today. But I just felt that there was a few people asking, and we'd try and cover that off. Right, just before I thank the panel, I'm going to ask each of you just to leave one or impart one last piece of advice. It can be something you've already mentioned or something you've not, but just a takeaway that those who have listened in intently for the last hour can take away and hopefully impart back in their organisation to make a positive difference going forward.
Thank people on social media. Join TikTok.
Join TikTok. I won't be joining TikTok, but yeah.
Draw a picture of your supporter and stick it on the corner of your laptop screen.
Yeah, I loved that one earlier.
Yeah. I'd just add, you're giving people an experience one way or the other, so find out what it really is, and then work closely with all of the right people to figure out how to make it better, and then test things to see whether it's working or not, and keep building on that kind of work.
Yeah, not fantastic. Look, Sophie, Matt, Lindsey, thank you so much for your time. I know how busy each of you are, and for everybody that's attended this morning, thank you for giving up an hour of your time in such a busy time of the year as well. You'll see in the chat that the marketing team have just dropped in a link if you'd like to subscribe to Oaks' monthly newsletter, where there is a plethora of information that comes out every month, different themes, different topics, lots of links. For those who have not managed to get back to in the questions or have not got round to answering, we will try and send out those answers in written format if we can. Sorry, there was one more that was just asking about the report that you mentioned earlier, Sophie. Would you mind just dropping that in the webinar chat, please?
Yeah, no problem at all. It's hosted
and that was for Louise.
Yeah, great. It's hosted on the Sophie website. If you don't know Sophie, they're the showcase of fundraising, innovation, inspiration. They have so many amazing resources, reports, evidence, stuff you can show your finance director. So I'll pop that in the chat now.
Lovely. Thank you once again. Hopefully everybody's taken away at least something, even if it is joining TikTok. Thanks, everyone.